Hello and welcome to your favorite business show on television. That's Business Daily, coming to you from the studio of Trust Television in the Federal Capital Territory in Abuja. This is where we give you up-to-the-minute details and excellent analysis on major developments in the world of business, finance, and the Nigerian economy generally. I am your host, Christiana Amodu Otiya. Thank you for making a date with us on the program today. On today's edition of the program, we will be focusing on the economic component of the speech delivered by President Muhammadu Buhari on the occasion of Nigeria's 62nd independence. Now, the president campaigned on three major pillars. His campaign were premised on corruption, on tackling corruption, I beg your pardon, the economy, and also insecurity. Now, we will be looking at that speech critically and how Nigeria has done, how far so far for the country. I will be joined by global economic analyst and also chief economic strategist at ECOWAS, Professor Ken Ife. He will be lending perspective to some of the highlights of that speech. We'll be looking at the key takeaways, especially for the economy. The president spoke to issues around the agricultural sector, the oil and gas sector, and also the recent hike we saw coming from the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, talking about the CBN, how that policy is equally affecting Nigeria and how that is expected to rein in inflation, which is currently at over 20% in the country. That will be the focus of the program today. Now, before we get into the crux of the matter today, we'll take a short break. When we return, the program will continue and you'll get to meet my guest for the day. Please stay.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back and thank you for still staying there with us on Business Daily. Now, we said we're going to be focusing on some of the economic components we saw from the broadcast, the Independence Day broadcast, talking about the speech by President Muhammadu Buhari. The president did speak to some of the developments we have seen, the milestones this administration has reached, especially on the front of the economy, talking about the agricultural sector, the PIA. He mentioned the president, the Petroleum Industry Act, a lot of that, and how it has helped bring stability and investment into that sector. The president spoke about how global factors are, of course, are responsible for some of these challenges. Now, let's have some of those highlights. Now, the president, talking about what we have from that speech, the president said the administration efforts in resetting the economy manifested in Nigeria exiting into economic recession by the very practical and realistic monetary and fiscal measures to ensure effective public financial management. In addition, the effective implementation of the Treasury Single Account as the TSA and cutting down on the cost of governance also facilitated early exits from the recession. Of course, we've seen Nigeria come into two successive recession and how that affected the economy. The president also said the administration will continue to ensure that fiscal policies are supported by a robust and contemporary monetary policy that recognizes peculiarities in the midst of growing global economic difficulties. Now, he said the unemployment is being confronted, debt burden, growing inflation, and all of these macroeconomic parameters. He gave a scorecard, basically, of how far the administration have come with that. I want to bring my guest into the discussion now. He's Professor Ken Ife, of course, Chief Economic Strategist to ECOWAS, and also a renowned macroeconomic analyst. Welcome to the program, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Prof, I know you have seen the full text of the speech from the president talking about, alluding to different things, talking about different developments across the national development of the country. I just want to simply ask you, on the economic front, are we better, especially as a nation that has hit 62? Because a man that is 62 years old would count gains in the family. Oh, my child has graduated from the university, my child is married, I have grandchildren. At 62, looking at all the macroeconomic parameters when this administration came in, and now, is the country better off, or is the economy better off?
It's very difficult to say, actually, because it's a moving target. Population is exploding, so many different things are happening. But I can say that on balance, great effort has been put into making sure that we have an economy we could work with. And the president has given a honest and modest account of what he has done and the contribution that he has made, which, to him makes a big difference. We still have some work to do. It's not to hurry yet. There's quite some way to go. But we're getting there.
I like the fact that you said it's not Uhuru yet, because definitely if we look at the numbers and the facts, the numbers don't look so good. Now, I want to speak about some of the findings, some of the developments we saw from that speech. Now, the president did say the administration removed several decades of uncertainty for potential investors in the oil and gas sector. He alluded to the PIA and how that has helped attract investment in that sector. This line, the number 14 component of that speech, is that the reality of the oil and gas sector? Because that sector has been in the news recently.
It is. It's taken us over 20 years of going forward and backwards on the petroleum industry bill. And then finally, we had a president that had the resolve to say, enough is enough. I'm going to pass this into law. However imperfect it is, I'm going to pass it. And he has passed it. And it's a very great step that he has taken. It's not perfect. Mm-hmm. Because there are so many exclusions from the law for NNPC and all that, and many other things that fell out. But it's a major, major step forward in the sense that we have now removed, because NNPC had their hands on the tail. Everything that comes goes to them, and then they toss some change to the governors, to share. That has changed. So now FIRS can go and get our money, which you see is heading to 10 trillion, in terms of revenue, but then now NNPC is told to, mind your business, and your business is just to work in this area, and this is so much we can give you. But it's still work in progress, because we are having the backlash is in the so-called subsidy, the size of that subsidy. So it's changed fundamentally. Has it encouraged investors? Just imagine the mere fact that has been passed, and NNPC was setting up as a private company. Mm-hmm. You could see Afrexim give them $5 billion without even, blinking an eye, and that shows you that more investment can come, by virtue of that. And is he going to fundamentally change certain things? Like, yes, there is a lot of money going into investment in frontier basins, about 30% of the hydrocarbon tax. And that is good, because globally, people are no longer investing in prospecting. And that's one of the reasons why the crude oil price is going up, because there isn't much more investment going. People are all hoping that by 2030 we'll switch to electric cars and all of that. Yes. But that is not going to be the way it's going to be. It's going to play out in a different way. So we'll continue to invest in other sources in identifying other sources of crude. So that's helpful to us. But that hasn't answered the issue of vandalizing our facilities. Prof,
I want you to speak to issues around poverty, because in the speech it was mentioned that we all heard about lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. 2015, we are in the year 2022. We saw that promise coming in 2019, there about at some point, Nigeria was adjudged by the World Poverty Clock as the poverty capital of the world, and poverty rate in the country is over 40%. Misery index is doing 70%. There's unemployment, there's underemployment on the other hand. I want you to appraise the poverty eradication drive of the administration.
Well, you know, one thing that you have to understand, everybody needs to understand, is you need investment to create productive activity, which in turn creates employment. And employment creates disposable income. And from disposable income, you can sustainably reduce poverty. So if you think that poverty is about handouts, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, that's not sustainable. So you have to take the two together. You have to be investing, and then you have to be making sure that you actually do the minimum required, which is there are 500 billion naira social intervention fund every year, which is not even up to what one man will steal from the treasury. But nevertheless, there is something going out there. But then the greater investment in infrastructure that encourages people to invest, and invest creates activity, and the activity job, and that. Yes. So it's all being handled as a two-lane traffic.
Prof, I want you to speak on issues around policy implementation. It is normally said that we are not devoid of the best plans in Nigeria.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, where we have good plans on paper. There was a time we had the Vision 2020. There are so many plans that we have seen come out from Nigeria, from different committees across board. Some you have even been part of. Some of these committees that now we have the NDP, the National Development Plan, which should run till 2025. It is normally said that the bane of development always lies in the implementation process.
Correct.
Now, how would you...
And the resources.
And the resources to implement. What would be the way forward, especially in terms of implementation? Because we see this affect across board. Even the budgetary process is also not left out. What should be the right solution to address this?
There isn't anything like one solution. There's nothing like one solution that fits all. It's a very dynamic economy. It's a huge economy, the biggest in Africa. And the areas you have to look at, and they are interconnected areas. You have infrastructure. Infrastructure means the difference between why people are not investing in your country and why they are choosing to invest in many other countries that have infrastructure. Our stock of infrastructure in Nigeria is only 35% of our GDP, compared to South Africa, 80%. So we're so far. We are among the lowest in Africa. And then you come to revenue, we are actually the lowest in Africa on revenue, 7% of our GDP, government revenue.
Yes.
And then when minimum should be 20%, according to ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria, Ghana is around 18%, South Africa is about 22%, and many others, all Africans are all over 15%. So we have a strategic initiative, revenue initiative, to increase from 7% to 15% by 2025. That is gaining traction because there's a Finance Act every year that is smoothing and tightening the news. So you're going to have to look at how revenue comes in to able to pay for debt that we are increasing. And the debt are necessary because there are three existential threats facing the country. One is insecurity. You've got to finance insecurity. Two is unemployment that has gone to a scandalous scale right now. If you do nothing, it's not an option. Then you have the third one, which is what was occasioned by health crisis, COVID, and then all the ripple effect from COVID. COVID also put us into debt. So we have to cope with all of that. And then you have policies that are working together. You have monetary policy and fiscal policy. They interacted well to be able to get us out of recession in 2017 and even more faster in 2020, which in just one quarter we're out. Then you have fiscal policy, monetary policy to worry about, in the sense of how the shortage of revenue coming from forex revenue coming from NMPC has pushed CBN against the wall, to the point that instead of $3 billion they should be receiving every month from NMPC, they're only getting 300, which is 10%. And yet they're expected to pump out $1.8 billion every month to finance import. And also we have to pay for loans that are denominated in dollars. So you've seen also challenges around trade policy. We haven't even had our trade policy reviewed since 2002.
I think
it should be every 5 years.
The Office of Trade Negotiation is saying we should
I hear all
expect
that.
one by January.
I hear them, but we'll see. Both of us will get to January.
Yeah.
I've been hearing that. I was part of 2012 when we wrote it. I was part of the 5 professors that wrote the thing. It still hasn't gone to Executive Council. Then you have the industrial policy, which is neither here nor there, in the sense that we have all these industrial parks about, FTs, free trade zones and sequential economic zones, about 35 of them, and you can't see major traction except perhaps in the Lekki Free Trade Zone and that. Then you also have area like after industrial policy and health, and then also you have health, human resource development area where we are really lagging behind. I see what the crisis is going on in education. Health, we've been trying, but we could do more in health because we expect 10% of investment to go, government revenue expenditure to go to health. But we got out of COVID. That was a big plus for the health agenda. So we have some of these areas that you have to put in proper perspective to be able to judge.
Prof, I want you to, while you were speaking, you spoke about the issue of Nigeria's debt burden, and I want you to quickly speak to that before we go on the first break of the program. Now, we're doing debt about 42.84 trillion naira, talking about Nigeria's debt profile, and this is the beginning of the last quarter of the year. This month is the beginning of the last quarter of the year 2022. What are your thoughts on how we can break down the burgeoning debt profile? Because then again, it has been said that we are borrowing for consumption.
Well, that's probably how some people translate that. But let's look at the genesis. The government infrastructure is one of the things government promised in their manifesto. And then when they came in, they took a position rather than go and start awarding new contracts. No, all contractors go back to site. We'll pay you as we find the money. And all contractors went back to site. There's no highway in this country you will not find contractors working. They may not have finished them, but they are all there working because the cost of shutting them down and issuing new contracts and having them go to court means that government would have more penalties and more bill to pay, and you still wouldn't even get the new people money to give to them. So it wasn't. So that was a better option, but that also meant that they have to borrow to finance these jobs because those jobs have also increased in price because of what was going on with currency and the other stuff. So they have been borrowing to make sure that the work are finished or brought to some reasonable. And that has been a major source. We're also having security, that you have to buy those equipment. 22% of the budget is on the defense. So what are you going to do? You sit down and then you get overrun like Afghanistan. You can do that. So government has to find money to persecute the war. And then with inflation, we are having a very high inflation. It's also part of the tax. It's a part of the war tax because we are seeing all of that playing. But in terms of that same borrowing going forward, we are still, as you mentioned, 23%. We are still less than the 40% conventional, and then 55% based on what the World Bank says Nigeria could actually rise to in terms of debt to GDP. But the challenge is revenue. Government revenue to GDP, because it's the revenue that pays the debt, not the GDP.
Sure.
And on that particular count, I've just gone through the motion that only about 7 to 8% is what we are getting compared to our, to GDP.
Prof,
so we could do more.
Okay, I like that. We can do more as a nation. Now we'll take a short breather now, and when we come back, would have Prof react to a fact we put together, some data we put together, talking about a then and now, 62 years down the line. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back shortly. Please stay.
That's great. Good to see you.
Welcome back, and thank you for still staying there with us on the program. If perhaps you're just picking the remote control and tuning in to this channel, Trust Television, this is Business Daily. Of course, we're coming to you from our studios. You have missed some part of the key analysis by my guest in the studio, Professor Ken Ife, speaking about the economic component we saw from the presidential speech, the broadcast on Nigeria's Independence Day. Now, let's take a look at from the year 2015, when the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration came into power, and now we are in the year 2022, taking a look at a dashboard of how far we have come. Now, GDP per capita in 2015 was at $2,719. 2022, $2,275. Total debt was at 12.06 trillion naira. Now we are at 42.84 trillion naira, as at the last data from the Debt Management Office. Inflation 9.60% at single digit. Now we are 20.52% according to data, of course, from the National Bureau of Statistics. Unemployment 10.40%, currently at 33.3%. We're still yet to see the current unemployment figures from the NBS. The head of the NBS, they say they're working assiduously to deliver that. Oil production 2 million barrels per day. Now Nigeria has fallen below the 1 million barrels per day mark, 900,000 barrels per day, and that has been attributed to issues around oil theft and vandalism. Misery index 38.70%. Now we are doing over 73.84% for Nigeria. The price of flour 7,000 naira per bag. Now 26,000 naira. Price of bread 300 naira, and per loaf now at about 800 naira per loaf. So the price of rice 8,700 naira per bag, now 32,000 naira. Price of pasta 180 naira, 400 naira. Fish per kg 900 naira, now 3,000 naira. Price of palm oil 25 liters 6.5, now 20,000 naira. Crate of eggs 700 naira, 2,000 naira. Price of diesel 145 naira per liter, 800 naira per liter. Price of cooking gas 12 kg, 3,200, now 10,500. Price of airfares 15,000 naira, now 50,000 naira. That's for the local ticket. The FDI inflow into Nigeria $3.6 billion, $1.535 billion. Prof, your reaction? You've seen the table. See how a comparison of 2015 and now we are in 2022. Not the picture does not look so good. But then again, I know you will say there are factors that contributed to it. But how would you assess the development from 2015 till this time?
Look at the population increase at 3% cumulatively, and then you see how much we have added to the number. Number two, there are many exogenous factors. That is, factors that are outside your control. And one of them is the crude sales, the price, and the production volume. Vandalism has resulted in drop from 2 million barrels a day to 900,000 barrels a day. That means you have less than revenue that you have. Yes. You need to do what you could do. Then some of the exogenic factors that drove us into recession is that the price of the crude, both price and volume dropped, and then we went into recession in 2017, and in 2020 it was a different matter. It was health, and then it was compounded by supply chain disruption. But today, some of these prices are also affected by Russia conflict with the
war.
Yeah, with Ukraine, because the wheat is produced mainly a huge 40%, and then that shortage means that it translated to price of flour and bread, all that went up. At the same time, we are an import-dependent economy. That has not changed. And what that meant is, even where we have fuel, petrol and gas, crude and gas, which Russia also has. Now, that ordinarily we shouldn't be affected by that.
Yes.
But because we are not refining our product, we're having to take it out, pay for the transportation, refine and bring it back. That's why we are suffering on the price of PMS.
Yes.
But the price of diesel is also the same. We are not refining the diesel as much. We're still having to import. And look at the jump from just over 100 to 800%. That's 500% increase. And then look at the knock-on effect on all the industries that are using diesel. Transport systems are using diesel. And even the petrol, people that say the petrol use diesel tractor to come and they use diesel to run their generator at the so everything dependent on that has a knock-on effect. So you have that hitting the prices, and being an import-dependent economy means that the problem of Russia turning down the gas tap to Europe means that their production costs go up, and we're importing from them, and our prices also, we have direct flow from, so imported inflation. There's not much you can do. The economy is still import dependent. Puts more pressure on foreign exchange, because the GDP you saw and the GDP per capita coming down is only coming, the absolute GDP in Naira is going up.
Prof, I just want to ask you.
It's going up.
Yes, I want.
But because you have to divide it with exchange rate to get it in dollar, that's why it seems to be coming down.
Prof, we have just 1 minute to wrap up the program. Now, I hear what you're saying, talking about external factors that we have no control over. But don't you think, even as economic managers, probably there was not enough preparation to ensure that there are buffers to tackle this? I want you to answer this in 30 seconds.
No, I'm not sure. Well, buffer is, I don't think you should blame the economic manager there, because the forces I've mentioned to you are exogenic to a great extent. Yes, we could have buffer if we had savings. We don't need to borrow. But we don't have national savings. We had to borrow. And as I told you, those three existential problems, do nothing is not an option.
I want to ask you, in percentage, what's your score?
They did well, it's difficult to actually put a score.
Prof, you're being diplomatic.
But I think I would say about 70% or something like that.
70%, okay.
We could do more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Ken Ife, the macroeconomic analyst and also chief economic strategist to ECOWAS, speaking to the economic component we saw from the speech of the presidential broadcast by President Muhammadu Buhari. 70% score there from Prof. But of course, there's always a room called improvement that should be harnessed. You can catch up on all you need to know in the polity and also in the world of business on our social media platforms. Thank you for joining in on the program today. I am Christiana Amodu Otinya. Enjoy the rest of your day.